Right, it seems like everyone and their mother are genuinely discussing this, apart from my mother, because she doesn't like Formula 1 at all. But most people are debating this in the F1 community. And obviously what I'm talking about are those F1 driver ratings. Obviously, we saw the trailer drop earlier this week for F1 2020 My Team. This really lovely trailer. Loved it, every aspect of it, apart from... in the middle, they did a real bit of a reveal of driver ratings, and over the weekend, last weekend, F1 were promoting the driver ratings that Codemasters have come up with for every Formula 1 driver on the current grid, and F2 as well from last season and into this next season, because of course the new F1 game is going to have the 2019 F2 driver grid, and then we'll have the 2020 F2 driver grid kind of patched in later on, so they've got the stats for those guys as well. But over the weekend, specifically F1, obviously the actual F1 account, not the F1 game, the actual F1 account was also promoting and tweeting about these driver ratings from the F1 game. They've made them in the form of these kind of ultimate team style cards, and let's just say people have either lost their collective shit, everyone's had something to say about all of these cards. Like, there's literally every single one I've seen someone pick it apart for something, and you know what? I've just felt the need to jump on the bandwagon and throw my hat into the ring. I'm not gonna in-depthly look at everything here, because I'm not here to create a mass debate. I mean, you can do in the comments below, but I'm not here to start a mass debate. I'm just going to react to the ratings here, give my little opinion on them, give some insight perhaps of why they are the way they are, because obviously I've played the F1 game a lot, and I know the fact that they've probably made these ratings with the F1 game in mind. They haven't, you've got to remember, this isn't F1 making these ratings as just a, broad, this is what we think of our drivers. This is the F1 game making these ratings for the game, for how their AI will react in the game. So having played obviously the F1 game for many years and career mode for many years, I know how the AI system works a little bit in terms of the driver level and how good they are in the car, and also in conjunction with how good the car they're driving is, because having done a lot of modding on the PC version of F1, I've kind of sussed out sometimes the differences. For example, on F1 2019, Stroll's AI and Perez's AI, there is a consistent 6/10 gap between them, probably even at some circuits 8/10 gap from circuit to circuit. No matter what happens to the Racing Point car, that gap is always there, just as a little inkling. So that's like a little insight to sometimes how that works. So let's go through these and see what the hell is up. So we're starting off here with Red Bull. I don't know, for some reason Red Bull's the top team. I don't know why they've not just placed this in like championship order or whatever, but there we go. We've got Max Verstappen with 90 and Alexander Albon 79. Now, on face value, that seems pretty okay, I would say. Albon is not proven yet. He's had one full year in Formula 1, so I don't think you can really say he's going to be right up there, even though he did even though he did obviously a decent job at matching, or somewhat kind of just being good in the Red Bull car alongside Verstappen in very weird circumstances. So that's fine on face value, 90, 79. But then when you start comparing it to the drivers below, Ferrari, Leclerc 86, Sebastian Vettel 89. Now, I'm going to tell you straight away the reason why it's like this. Now, I think in real life, I think the general opinion is that maybe Vettel is not at his prime anymore, and that Leclerc genuinely is actually a better driver in all kind of regards, and so therefore he should be rated higher. I can tell you for a fact that in the game, at least in F1 2019, and I'm sure it's therefore carried over to F1 2020. In the game, overall, Sebastian Vettel, the AI driver, does better over the course of a career mode season. Leclerc can beat Vettel in qualifying and certain situations where it's just on pure pace and stuff like that, and also in the races, sometimes Leclerc's AI is a bit more punchier, so that's why I feel like you can see racecraft is higher than Vettel's, because Leclerc's AI has been coded to be punchier in the F1 game, in F1 2019, I'm saying, qualifying, and I would suggest that all of those kind of characteristics, there was no reason for them to really change it that much for F1 2020 because we've not seen them race in 2020, so we don't know if they've changed their driving style, if they're more confident or not. So the characteristics would carry over, I think, from 2019 to 2020. So in the game, Leclerc's AI is sometimes a bit punchier in the game, but overall, Vettel does end up doing better than him over the course of his season. I think you can see that in career modes of mine when Vettel and Leclerc being teammates, but also in just general when they've moved teams, you can see Vettel's AI does do pretty well in general, no matter what car he's in compared to his teammates. So I can see why they've done this. And it's more based off on the AI themselves. But comparing then to Verstappen and Albon, it's a bit odd. For me, Verstappen v Leclerc, I think there should be a closer overall rating. I feel like, if you're going to have Verstappen as a 90, just due to the experience, I guess, that Verstappen's got, he'd be 90. And Leclerc, maybe like an 89, just because, if you're talking kind of like experience terms, obviously Verstappen's been there for a lot longer on the grid in a Red Bull car, whereas Leclerc, it was only his first season in a top team last season, so maybe that's still, got to catch up if we're kind of, looking at all the ratings of experience, racecraft awareness, and pace. So that, for me, is the kind of funniest thing about that, but also at the same time, in my opinion, I can see why they've done that. For now, we'll leave Albon there. We'll come back to him in a sec when we get to the AlphaTauri team. We then move to Mercedes and Renault. So Hamilton, the highest rated driver on the grid, obviously makes sense. Reigning world champion, and in the F1 game has been the best AI for a while now. So that makes sense. 94, no problem. Valtteri Bottas, 90. Now, people are trying to nitpick this a lot of why he's 90. I'm simply going to say the reason he's 90 is because he's in the Mercedes car, and that's it. I'm not talking in terms of real life. I'm talking in terms of the F1 game. That's why he's 90. It's not because of him as a driver. It's because he's in the Mercedes car, and they need to ensure that this second AI car can still do well. Like, we look at F1 2019, the two Mercs get 1-2s consistently, or they're kind of checkerboarded with the Ferrari cars. The Ferrari car in F1 2019 is better than the Mercedes, so that's why you got kind of a nice checkerboard like that. Obviously, in 2020, it might be different. The two Mercs might be 1-2. But to ensure that in the F1 game, they're 1-2 every single race and stuff like that in qualifying and such, they have to make Valtteri's AI that good, because no matter what kind of good of a car they can give him, there's that overriding sometimes, the AI can sometimes get blocked, they sometimes have tire issues, there's that random number generator that just goes on in the background that sometimes they can get some bad luck. So to ensure that consistency of Mercedes kind of dominance, and Mercedes, being right always up there at the forefront, being strong, they have to make his AI that good to make sure he's always there, basically, and at least P4, you would say, if they're being checkerboarded with Red Bull or Ferrari. Yeah, but it's a little bit, I think, unless you're a Valtteri Bottas fan, I don't know how you kind of say that he's got awareness 99, like he's the highest awareness driver on the grid. Like, I would say Hamilton's surely got to have the highest stats on every count, pretty much. If we go to Renault, Ricciardo 87, Ocon 80. Ocon, obviously, he was in F1 before, so I can see why they've rated him 80. He's had a year out, so I think that's a pretty fair thing to Albon in that regard. Ricciardo 87. I have no comparison. It's hard to tell because Hulkenberg's not here anymore, so I can only go off Hulkenberg. But in the game, Ricciardo was, I would say, around like an 87 sort of rating. Like his AI is definitely still just as good as Leclerc, for example, in terms of that kind of arrangement of if his AI was to transfer to a top team, or his car became a top team in career mode, he would be pretty decent. Obviously not right up the sharp end like Max, let's say, or Hamilton, but still pretty damn decent. So I don't really have a muddle with the Renault guys, and that's pretty okay. Then we come to AlphaTauri. Now this is a bit weird and odd to me. Kvyat and Gasly are the same rating, which I don't fully agree with. I feel like Gasly would be like an 81 in comparison to a Kvyat 80. Like, he's just that little bit better in terms of just general racecraft, I think. I think Gasly's got better racecraft than Kvyat. I think we've seen that a few times with Gasly, especially in the Toro Rosso last season when he got rejuvenated. And in his first season in Toro Rosso, he clearly had a lot of good race pace about him. In terms of the experience, now I've seen people like Luke Smith on the Autosport podcast they've been doing also bring this up, that Gasly's got an experience of 53. Albon 52. That's a difference of 1 point. Albon's had only one season in F1. Gasly's had full two. So that makes no sense whatsoever. So that's a little bit weird. Obviously, they need to kind of fit the. I actually know what? I don't actually know. I can't actually explain that for that. I was about to try and have an explanation of why they've done that. I literally don't know. I literally don't know, Cody, so I don't know why. In terms of the AI, in terms of driver AI, Gasly and Kvyat's AI are quite well matched on F1 2019 at least. So I can see why they're the same rating, to be fair. They're literally covered by like half a tenth or a tenth at most circuits. So that makes sense in that regard. If we compare it then to go back to Red Bull, 79 to 90 is actually quite harsh then for a rating for Albon, because in the game, Albon's AI is not that bad. Obviously, when he switched over in the game in our career mode, we didn't see that. But if you play the base game again, when Albon's been switched to the Red Bull, his AI is not that far off Verstappen all the time. He's like maybe 6/10ths at some circuits and then about 3 to 2/10ths at others. So if you look at that, that's actually quite a harsh rating for him compared to Verstappen's 90 if you're looking at car to car. Then we move to Haas. I think this is pretty fair, 80 to 78. I would probably put Magnussen at 80 as well, though. I feel like they're quite well matched. They've got kind of weaknesses and strengths about them. In the game, Magnussen always does better in qualifying, and race pace wise, Grosjean has the ability, his AI has the ability to come back in a race. So that's why I think they're quite equalized in that. In terms of the F1 game, is that I've noticed that Magnussen's AI can consistently qualify better, and then Grosjean's AI can come back a little bit more in the races. And there's a definite chance that Magnussen's AI just falls away in the races, no matter how well he's done in qualifying. So game wise, I can sort of see that. But in terms of, racecraft, yeah, it makes sense. Pace-wise, I'll probably have Magnussen a little bit higher on pace there, but awareness, maybe a little bit less than that to kind of balance it out. Experience, I think that's the overall thing that's giving Roman this card of 80 compared to 78, is that experience of, obviously, he's been in F1 for a long, long time. We then move through to Alfa Romeo, 87 for Raikkonen. I think that's fair enough. 87, compared to Leclerc 86, though, that's a little bit odd, because I feel like, when Leclerc moved up to Ferrari, and Raikkonen moved out to Alfa Romeo, that was the switchover point where you're kind of saying, no, this is, now Kimi's going to that stage where he's getting lower than Leclerc now, and that's why they hired Leclerc. But you've got to remember, I think if you scroll up here, they said they've taken these values, they use real-world data from the last 5 seasons of F1, which is like fair enough, I guess, to get some real world data, but I think they should have then also had a bit of an onus of, right, that's the data for real life for the last 5 seasons, but let's also look at the kind of story that's being built between these drivers into 2020, which is the fact that Kimi is no longer, he's no longer needed by Ferrari, and that's why they got Leclerc in the end. So in that kind of way, I feel like, obviously Kimi's still got it. He's got some really great pace, he's got some really great racecraft, especially in the Alfa Romeo, compared to Giovinazzi especially, is where you can see. But in terms of this kind of the whole onus of, that's why he got booted out, and they wanted to hire Leclerc, and who's done a great job obviously in Ferrari. It's kind of a bit odd to see Raikkonen rated one more than Leclerc. But also at the same time, I can see the difference here, 73 to 87 in the game in F1 2019. There's a massive difference from Kimi to Giovinazzi. Like Kimi, if you put him in the right car, like let's say if the Alfa Romeo was like one of the best cars on the grid in career mode, like Kimi's AI would qualify at the top, and then Giovinazzi's AI could sometimes still be halfway down the order. So that disparity, I would say, is correct between those two. Then we come to McLaren. Now this is very striking in terms of, I feel like these two are quite equalised in a way. You've got to remember Lando out-qualified Sainz over the course of the season. Sainz, though, is the much better race driver, so I'm surprised that racecraft is in Lando's favour. I feel like Sainz has the much better racecraft. He's better in the race. Pace-wise, though, Lando maybe is more equalised to Sainz, if not a little bit better over one lap, because that was true in real life. In the game, I think that's fair enough in terms of these two are, that 3-point difference is the difference you see in the AI. Whether that's realistic or not, I don't know. Like I said, I'm just kind of talking about this in the context of the F1 game and trying to just give you some info about why they've maybe made these the way they are. Overall, though, these two in tandem I feel a lot lower than I thought they would be. I thought Sainz would be 84, and so therefore maybe Lando would be 81. So I think they've done both the McLaren drivers a little bit dirty in that kind of aspect of how high they are. But you've got to remember, going into 2020, maybe the McLaren car is a lot better than we maybe think it's going to be in terms of like the game. I think they maybe are going to rate the McLaren car quite highly. And so in tandem, that will equalize out as where McLaren should be in the running order in 2020, perhaps. Because in the F1 game, it's all about driver and car. It's not just the AI that determines it. It's about how good the car is. Like, you can make the car as good as you can, but if the AI is bad, they're not going to get the result, and vice versa. You need to have it the other way around as well. So maybe that's why maybe they made the McLaren car a little bit too good in a way, and so they have to kind of equalize it with having the AI a little bit lower. Maybe. Obviously, that will that will unfortunately make things a little bit worse if they ever got transferred around in career mode, let's say. And then we come through to Williams and Racing Point. I think this one's been a big point of contention for Lance Stroll and Russell in terms of the difference there. Russell, I think, has been done quite dirty with 75 compared to Stroll, but in a way also I can see what they get at in terms of it's not them as an individual, it's again them with the car pairing they're at. So because they're in a Williams car, they just have to be that, because if George Russell's AI was any better, he might start overperforming what that Williams car can actually do in real life, and so that's an issue. So I think that's why maybe Russell's AI rating is lower than maybe people want or think it could be. Also, at the same time, to be fair, he's unproven. He's only had a drive in a Williams car, so we don't really know how good he is in a better car. So for the sake of the Williams whole keeping them at the back in the game in career mode, it makes kind of sense that he's 75. 64, I mean, Latifi, he's a rookie, so you just don't know. So he's the same rating sort of as the F2 drivers. Then Perez, 85. If we look back at, I rate Sainz higher than Perez, in my opinion. So I think Perez has been kind of overrated in that kind of aspect compared to Sainz. I think but like I said, I would pull Sainz up, not push Perez down. Then compared to Stroll, I think that kind of goes in line with what we see in the F1 game in F1 2019. Stroll's AI is generally about 6/10 slower than Perez at every single circuit, so it makes sort of sense in that kind of regard. Stroll versus other drivers, compared to that's why I say again, I feel like McLaren as a whole got done dirty, because I think Stroll to Lando, there's not a 1 point difference in my opinion, but I can see why they've done it Perez to Stroll in this kind of manner. 7 point gap, 6/10 off in overall over most circuits makes sense. So I'm not going to debate anything about the actual stats. I'm not going to say personally what I specifically think each driver should have. I've given you an inkling of maybe what I think some might need bumps, and some might need nerfs. But in terms of the context of the F1 game, that's my little insight as to why they've made it that way. I think a lot of people, especially on F1 Twitter, and like I said, Luke Smith and Jess at Autosport debated it in a video they did earlier today, I think it was, and they were maybe talking about it quite in terms of the real life sport. Whereas you've got to remember, this is very much just the game, the AI. Literally, you have to think of it as the AI in the game. And really, if you think about it, you don't really kick up a fuss too much about the AI in F1 2019. I don't think there's that much of a big debate about how each AI performs compared to their teammate and such in the game. Maybe a little bit, like a tinge of it, but not that much. And then I think they do a pretty good job, Cody's, of balancing the car and the AI to get a pretty realistic grid order when the game launches. Always in F1 2019, we definitely got that. When the game launched, it was pretty decent at having that gauge. So you got to remember, it's the game context, and so with that, I think they've done a pretty okay job. I can see why they've done certain things. I'm curious to see what that means then for the McLaren car, like if it's going to be really good. The same thing with I'll be curious to see how then Ferrari ends up in the game versus Red Bull, with this kind of disparity and difference here of how's that going to end up. But obviously, I guess maybe they're also thinking of that's maybe how bad the Ferrari car would be. So they need to try and adjust the drivers accordingly to make sure they're not actually too good. Like the AI driver is not good enough to outperform a bad Ferrari car in the 2020 game, I guess. So Yeah, it's not like a. This is more of like a reaction, I guess, to the cards and just giving my little thoughts on the F1 game. But let me know what you guys are making of it, and I guess you guys can debate it in the comments below about the ratings and about the differences and whatnot. But that was just my reaction to the F1 cards in relation to the AI. So if you guys did enjoy the video, then be sure to smash the like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments below. If you're new around here, then do get subscribed for weekly Fallen content. I've been aarava. Hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day. I'll see you guys next time. Goodbye.